Welcome to Tom's True Crime. Today we take you to Louisville, Kentucky. On the morning of November 10th, 2016, a car was parked outside a home on Newburgh Road. John Dwyhaus had returned from his daily workout at the gym. He was about to get out of the car, but a phone call kept him in the vehicle for a few minutes. After finishing the call, he leisurely got out of the car and went into the house. When he opened the door, he froze. His gym bag fell out of his hand. His wife was lying on the living room floor in a pool of blood. John was confused and badly shocked. He rushed to his beloved, felt for a pulse, and urgently dialed the emergency phone number. The young woman was alive. In the living room, where the tragedy occurred, was a complete mess. Things were scattered. The purse of the unfortunate woman was emptied. On the second floor of the house, a small child was crying. Emergency services arrived at the house after 6 minutes. The area was cordoned off. The house was filled with police officers and investigators. The victim was rushed to the hospital. She turned out to be 28-year-old Emily Dwyhaus. Emily was born on July 31st, 1988, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She attended school in Louisville, Kentucky, but the family moved to Somerset in 1996. There, Emily graduated from Somerset Christian School in 2007, and as early as 2010, she graduated from Rollins College in Orlando, Florida with a bachelor's degree. Emily grew up in a deeply religious family where Christianity and the power of God's Word were paramount. Emily's father was the lead pastor of First Baptist Church in Somerset, Kentucky. The religious traditions of the church, sermons, and psalter the girl knew from childhood by heart and honored them unconditionally. When other children were in a hurry to grow up to know the taste of adult life, to go to parties and fall in love, Emily loved Jesus and dreamed of serving him. But God already loved his Emily. After all, he had created her in the likeness of an angel, a blonde-haired, slender girl with an open, kind smile and sincere intentions. But not only the girl's appearance was perfect, her thoughts and heart were also virgin. In every act of Emily was love for her neighbor. As a teenager, Emily took a vow of chastity and agreed not to even kiss a man until she was married, and she was always true to her word. But the girl's heart beat harder when she met her true and only love. It turned out to be John Dwyhaus. He was a native of Atlanta, Georgia. The guy studied religion at Asbury University and was also from a Christian and believing family. John and Emily met on a blind date at a Switchfoot Christian band concert, organized by her sister and John's best friend. At that time, they were studying in different colleges, but the lovers would spend every vacation together. It was pure platonic love, devoid of earthly lusts. They took walks together, shared their innermost thoughts and favorite excerpts from church books. They were never bored, for they knew how to rejoice in small things and sincerely joked with each other. Once before returning to school, John and Emily had a mock milkshake drinking contest, which Emily lost. John then jokingly called Emily a milk girl. Looking at her, he realized he had met the girl he wanted to marry. The couple dated long distance for a long time. They were constantly messaging each other on messengers, called each other and chatted for hours, every vacation they spent together. They were so reverent and tender about a serious relationship between a man and a woman that they visited a psychologist for a long time to learn how to communicate properly. On August 1st, 2009, the marriage ceremony of Emily and John Dwyhaus took place. After the wedding, John told friends that from the moment he kissed Emily, he knew that because of God's plan, there would be a special bond between them. For the first 4 years after the wedding, the Dwyhauses lived in South Carolina. John was an associate pastor at New Spring Church under Pastor Sean Murphy, but the young man wanted more, and he suggested to Emily that she move to Louisville to organize a new church for youth. John worked as a youth pastor, production director, and assistant campus pastor. Emily was reluctant to leave her family and part with her loved ones, and for a while struggled with the need to leave South Carolina, but she finally relented after her husband told her that God must have big things in store for them. In 2013, the Dwyhauses moved from South Carolina to Louisville to plant an independent, high-profile church in the North Side. The religious organization started by the young family was geared toward young people, as is made clear in the weekly videos the couple posted on their website about relationship advice, conflict resolution, and what the Bible says about intimate relationships. In 2015, the family had their firstborn child, Michael Dwyhaus. The family was perfectly happy. They had a comfortable home on a quiet street, a favorite job in the church, which was regularly attended by a large number of young people. Their sermons were listened to and believed in. They lived in perfect harmony and understanding. But the day of November 10th, 2016, changed the family's life once and for all. Ambulance crews arrive at the Dwyhaus residence on Newburgh Road around 8:30 a.m. The ambulance crews arrived at the Dwyhaus residence. The pregnant young woman was rushed to the hospital, where she was hooked up to a ventilator and underwent a series of resuscitative measures. But sadly, Emily died the next day, along with her unborn baby. As it turned out, the family was expecting a baby girl who was named Madison at her burial. Her death sparked a lot of sympathy and prayers on social media for an extended period of time as friends, family members, and strangers mourned Emily with public posts. On November 11th, the day Emily was officially declared dead, John released an official statement saying that Emily made it her life's calling to love and serve everyone she knew. She made it her life's mission to know Jesus as her personal savior to multitudes. Through her death and legacy, more people will come to a saving faith in Christ. I know without a shadow of a doubt that she wants me to continue what we started here. I firmly believe that God is still good, that He is taking our tragedy and turning it into triumph, and that the best is indeed yet to come. John wrote, "The murder of the pregnant woman was a blow not only to the entire Orthodox family, but also a shock to the entire state. People demanded that the perpetrator of Emily and her unborn child be found and punished." In his first interview under oath, John Dwyhaus said he found his wife Emily injured and unconscious on the living room floor. She was partially naked, with her underwear lying nearby, herself lying on the floor in a pool of blood face down. The pastor told investigators that he left the house around 6 a.m. to go to the fitness center to work out. When he left the door unlocked. "You always do that too, don't you? You leave and don't lock the door," he told investigators. It's hard to say whether the criminals would have stopped if John had still used the key, but it's pretty obvious that they wouldn't have entered the house so easily, and Emily had precious time to contact emergency services. But that didn't happen, and the attack left Emily with 3 gunshot wounds, one of which was to the head. No arrests were made in the case. Just days after the crime, police quickly determined that her husband, John Dwyhaus, was not involved in the horrific incident. However, in the trial transcripts, John Dwyhaus's testimony is supplemented by the testimony of the first emergency medical paramedic from the Louisville Fire Department, Tony Prywick, who arrived at the home after John's 911 call. He said John Dwyhaus was outside at the end of the driveway with bloody hands when they arrived at the house. Tony stated that John was very calm at the time. According to Tony, John did not understand what had happened to his wife Emily. He maintained that she was lying on the floor and he could not wake her up. John claimed that he came home from the gym at about 7:30 a.m. and continued his phone call with his friend Bob Miller in the driveway, occasionally getting out, strolling down the driveway, and peeking through the front door window to see if baby Michael was awake. He said he finished his call, entered his home at 8:10 a.m., and found Emily lying face down on the floor. He thought she was sick or unconscious. He called emergency services at 8:22 a.m. It took him 12 minutes to make the call. In an emergency situation, 12 minutes is a long time. He repeatedly said he just thought something had gone wrong with the pregnancy, that maybe his wife had gotten dizzy and fell. Did he not notice after 12 minutes that there was brain matter about 5 feet away from her body? Emergency room Dr. Tony Prywick testified that the blood on her head was coagulated, leading him to believe that the gunshot to her head had occurred about a couple hours earlier, but those transcripts were not made public. John was asked if he had called anyone else. He said that after he called 911, he called his father. Defense attorneys did not cross-examine John Dwyhaus. Authorities corroborated his story with surveillance footage from the gym, and he was not among the suspects. An autopsy conducted November 12th showed the woman suffered a gunshot wound to the back of her head. She also had a gunshot wound to the lower left arm that went to her biceps, and a through-and-through gunshot wound that went in and out of her upper back. There were also multiple scratches on the left cheek, a split lip, and a knocked-out lower tooth. The above injuries indicated a possible struggle between Emily and her attacker. A thorough investigation was launched. CCTV footage from nearby streets was examined, and neighbors and family acquaintances were interviewed. For example, a neighbor reported hearing gunshots about 35 minutes after John left the house. Another neighbor, Mark Jones, said their street was not the type of neighborhood where a shooting could occur, and that the Dwyhauses didn't deserve this. The neighbors were shocked, as everyone thought the Dwyhaus family were wonderful and truly loving people. Based on Emily's injuries and the missing bank cards and MacBook bag, the initial theory was robbery. During the investigation, police determined that on the morning of November 10, 2016, several emergency calls were made reporting a home invasion at separate homes near Dwyhaus's home. Around 5:20 a.m., one woman reported waking up to find her cell phone, laptop, purse, and keys missing from her apartment. Her car was also gone from the parking lot. The sliding glass door to her apartment was open, she said. 3 hours later, another woman reported a burglary at a home on Newburgh Road. Someone broke through the patio screen and got inside. According to police, for televisions, a MacBook Pro, a Tiffany pearl necklace, a pink women's sweater, a remote control, a bag of lemons, and bedding were missing from the home. 5 minutes after that, someone else from Newburgh Road called the emergency services. It was John Dwyhaus. Lieutenant Richard Riedel of the Louisville Police Department said police are looking for a connection between the homicide and other burglaries that occurred in the same neighborhood in the morning. Police have not released details about the investigation, honoring the secrecy of the investigation, but after getting hold of images of possible suspects from one of the burglarized homes, they released them asking the public to identify and help the investigation. John Dwyhaus was confident that the police department was doing everything they could to catch his wife's perpetrator. Investigators assured that they had never seen such carte blanche given to them to continue the investigation, so they were confident that very soon some of these promising leads would help find the person or persons responsible. The key clues used to track down the three suspects were a stolen pink sweater, cell phone records, and an ATM receipt. The receipt and sweater were found in a stolen Chrysler Sebring, which was used during the robberies. Authorities recovered the vehicle November 11th near the Dwyhaus' home. The debit card listed on the receipt matched the stolen card of Emily Dwyhaus. Investigators obtained a warrant to examine the ATM camera and found video showing the driver covering his face with the stolen pink sweater. Police relied on DNA testing, surveillance footage, and witnesses to identify the suspects. DNA testing from the sweater confirmed that Steve Garcia was one of the suspects. Garcia's identification was the first major breakthrough in the case. The affidavit said cell phone records were obtained because Garcia's number was in the database because of his parole for another burglary. Ethan Dombergstein's cell phone records were also obtained. These records showed that Garcia's and Dombergstein's cell phones were in the area when the crime was committed. The phone records also indicated that Dombergstein and Garcia were near the Chase Bank where Emily's debit card was used on the day of the murder. Nick Kartilov was the final piece of the puzzle. By examining surveillance footage in the area, police were able to identify Kartilov's phone number and trace his address. In the days that followed, reports also surfaced that a gun had been found near the Dwyhaus home. Police said a man delivered the gun to the Broad Ripple Fire Department, claiming to have found it outside the couple's home. The gun was analyzed by crime lab technicians. After 2 weeks of investigation and detective work, police charged 18-year-old Nick Kartilov and 21-year-old Steve Garcia with the murder of Emily Dwyhaus. A third burglary suspect, 24-year-old Ethan Dombergstein, was arrested for a parole violation, but was not charged with a felony because he did not enter the Dwyhaus home. After receiving crime lab results, the gun found near the victim's home was proven to be the weapon of the crime. All three assailants were apprehended. When questioned, Nick Kartilov said that he shot the woman twice somewhere because she jumped on him and he didn't want her to scratch him. Then, when she fell, he leaned over her body and shot her in the back of the head and bent over her, watching her bleed to death. A criminal trio came to rob the Dwyhaus house. They just wanted some money. So they headed to the Dwyhaus home, where the husband had left the front door unlocked when he left for the gym. Inside, they confronted Emily to keep her out of the way. Kartilov hit her with a gun. Garcia and Dombergstein saw the woman and wanted to leave. They already had the bank cards they had stolen earlier, so they went looking for an ATM. They tried unsuccessfully to get $500 from one ATM, but got $1,500 from another. This is where they got caught on CCTV. They then drove back to the Dwyhaus house to pick up Kartilov. In their absence, a struggle ensued in the house. Emily came to her senses after being hit and lunged at the perpetrator, at which point he tackled the woman. Afterward, Kartilov put the stolen debit cards in the car of accomplices who had gone to an ATM at the time of the crime, and when they returned, he admitted to shooting Emily. According to court documents, the Dwyhaus home was the third target of the November 10th attack by Kartilov, Garcia, and Dombergstein. In the first break-in, the thieves stole a laptop, wallet, and car while the resident was asleep. While inside the home, they discovered they were being recorded by a video camera, but simply moved on. The group drove up to another home, broke in through a patio window, and stole 4 televisions, a laptop, jewelry, a bag of lemons, and a pink sweater that eventually helped police identify them, the affidavit said. Court documents outlined the evidence police collected against the suspects. The most important piece of evidence, Garcia's DNA, was found on a pink sweater taken during the second burglary, which was then used to cover his face from a surveillance camera as he tried to withdraw cash using Emily Dwyhaus's bank card. Garcia and Donbergstein cooperated with the investigation in return for a reduced sentence. Nick Kartilov waived his right to remain silent and admitted to being near the scene of the burglary. He said he may have stopped in Dwyhaus' neighborhood, but claimed he was so confused he couldn't remember. Formal charges were filed by the county prosecutor. Nick Kartilov faces 13 charges, including the very same felony, after knowingly and willfully killing Emily Dwyhaus. Steve Garcia is charged with a felony. Both he and Kartilov face multiple charges of burglary, robbery, and theft. Ethan Donbergstein, who was in custody due to a parole violation, also faces burglary charges. There was a 4th person who knew about the robberies, burglaries, and other crimes, but did not participate in them. He was questioned and released. The Louisville Metropolitan Police Department's Violent Crimes Unit worked with the gang unit and federal marshals to arrest Kartilov. Because the victim was pregnant, prosecutors said they would consider filing additional charges related to the fetus. Even though the woman's underwear was removed and her shirt was pulled up, they said there was no evidence to support the rape charges. Nick Kartilov's first trial took place in December 2021, but the trial was over in seconds when it was discovered that one of the jurors had shared information about the case with other jurors. The disclosure interrupted the trial. A mistrial was declared. The final trial was held in October 2022. Subsequent jury selection was more thorough. The county drew more than 100 people as possible jurors. Each had to fill out a 16-page questionnaire, so attorneys could assess whether they could reach a fair verdict. Nick Joe Kartilov was sentenced to 86 years in the Kentucky State Correctional Institution for the murder of Emily Dwyhaus and for additional charges related to a burglary from home. Ethan Donbergstein and Steve Garcia agreed to plea agreements and testified against Nick Kartilov at trial. Both received sentences ranging from 20 to 35 years in prison. A murder conviction in Kentucky can send a person to prison for 45 to 60 years, and some are punishable by life in prison or the death penalty. Prosecutors file a motion to enhance Nick Kartilov's sentence, which means he could face an additional 20 years in prison because Emily Dwyhaus was pregnant when he allegedly massacred her. John Dwyhaus, the church's pastor, said he is relieved that those responsible for killing his wife have been caught and will not be able to harm anyone else. Emily Dwyhaus's death has resonated with thousands of people, including the state's chief executive. Her funeral at a Christian church was attended by more than 2,000 people. John Dwyhaus's church set up a donation page to help pay for Emily Dwyhaus's funeral and medical expenses. The fact that he received an insurance payout after his wife's death does suggest that he may or may not have accidentally forget to lock the door that day on November 10, 2016. On March 2, 2017, John Dwyhaus bought a new 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom home with a pool. He then sold the very house where Emily was murdered. For an unhappy husband who lost his beloved, John was pretty happy. In July 2017, he posted a photo of his new home on his blog and captioned it, "How happy I am to have pool parties in my new home." Now John Dwyhaus is happy in his new marriage. In our next story, we take you to Manhattan, New York. Rachel Davis was born in 1980 to a middle-class family in San Francisco, California. From a young age, she displayed a keen intellect and a drive for success. Her parents, both lawyers, instilled in her a love for achieving and a strong work ethic. Rachel excelled in school, particularly in mathematics and science, earning a full scholarship to Columbia University. David Benozly, born in 1975, came from a wealthy family. His family owns a chain of home care businesses and golf courses. Despite this, David was determined to make his own mark on the world. He attended Harvard Business School, where he honed his natural talent for business development. Their paths crossed in the summer of 2002 at a finance conference in New York City. Rachel, fresh out of college and working as a junior analyst at a prestigious investment company, was immediately drawn to David's confidence and charm. David, in turn, was captivated by Rachel's sharp wit and ambition. Their whirlwind romance began with a late-night discussion about market trends and ended with a sunrise walk through Central Park. Within a year, they were engaged, and their wedding in the fall of 2003 was the social event of the season. The union seemed perfect. David's business acumen, combined with Rachel's financial expertise, made them a formidable power couple. They settled in Manhattan, where David started his consulting firm, with Rachel by his side as CFO. The early years of their marriage were filled with success and happiness. The company grew rapidly, attracting high-profile clients and establishing a reputation for innovative solutions. Rachel and David worked seamlessly together, their complementary skills driving the company to new heights. They became fixtures in Manhattan's social scene, hosting lavish parties and generously supporting local charities. To the outside world, the Benozlys appeared to have it all: a thriving business, beautiful home, and a strong, loving partnership. Friends and acquaintances often remarked on their apparent devotion to each other, citing the longing looks and gentle touches they shared even after years of marriage. Little did anyone suspect that beneath this veneer of marital bliss, the seeds of betrayal had already been planted, waiting for the right moment to sprout and ultimately destroy everything they had built together. The cracks in the Benozly's perfect facade began to show in the spring of 2006. Rachel, who had always prided herself on her intuition, started to notice subtle changes in David's behavior. Late nights at the office became more frequent, and his explanations grew increasingly vague. The affectionate gestures that had once been so natural between them now seemed forced and perfunctory. Driven by a gnawing suspicion, Rachel began to pay closer attention to David's movements and communications. She noticed mysterious charges on their credit card statements and overheard hushed phone conversations that abruptly ended when she entered the room. Despite her growing unease, Rachel maintained a calm exterior, unwilling to confront David without concrete evidence. The confirmation of her worst fears came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in April. David had left his laptop at home while rushing to a meeting. A notification popped up on the screen, an email from an unknown address with the subject line, "Can't wait to see you tonight, my love." With trembling hands, Rachel opened the message and felt her world shatter around her. The email was from Olivia Clark, a violinist whom David had met at an opera the previous year. The message detailed their ongoing affair in explicit terms, leaving no doubt about the depth of their relationship. Attached were intimate photos that twisted the knife even further into Rachel's heart. As she sat there staring at the undeniable proof of her husband's infidelity, Rachel experienced a maelstrom of emotions. Shock gave way to anger, then to a deep, aching sense of betrayal. Tears streamed down her face as she thought of the years she had dedicated to building their life together, only to have it all undermined by David's selfish actions. But as the initial wave of emotions subsided, a cold, calculating resolve began to take its place. Rachel realized that she had a choice to make. She could confront David and risk losing everything, or she could bide her time and craft a revenge so complete that it would destroy him utterly. In that moment, as rain lashed against the windows of their mansion, Rachel Benozly made a decision that would set in motion a chain of events that would change their lives forever. In the days following her discovery, Rachel moved through her daily routine like an automaton, her mind constantly churning with plans and possibilities. She knew that if she was to have her revenge, it would require patience, cunning, and an iron will. Rachel was determined to hit David where it hurt him most: his pride and his wallet. The first step was to ensure that David remained oblivious to her knowledge of his affair. Rachel drew upon her considerable acting skills, honed through years of navigating high society events, to present a facade of normalcy. She continued to play the role of the devoted wife, all the while observing David's every move with new eyes. As she watched him go about his daily life, lying effortlessly and taking her devotion for granted, Rachel's resolve only strengthened. She began to formulate a plan that would not only secure her financial future, but also bring David to his knees. The opportunity presented itself sooner than she had anticipated. Over dinner one evening, David mentioned a potential new venture, a revolutionary financial technology platform that he believed could revolutionize the industry. His eyes gleamed with excitement as he spoke of the potential profits and prestige such a project could bring. Rachel saw her chance and seized it. She listened intently, asking insightful questions and offering enthusiastic support. Over the next few weeks, she subtly guided David's thinking, using her financial expertise to highlight the potential benefits of the venture. She suggested that they invest heavily in the project, positioning it as a way to secure their future and leave a lasting legacy. David, blinded by his own ambition and Rachel's apparent support, agreed wholeheartedly. Together, they began to pour substantial resources into developing the platform. Rachel insisted on being closely involved in every aspect of the project, citing her desire to support David's vision fully. Behind the scenes, however, Rachel was laying the groundwork for her grand deception. She meticulously created a network of shell companies and offshore accounts, carefully hidden beneath layers of legitimate transactions. As the company began to generate profits, Rachel implemented a complex system of financial misdirection, siphoning off small amounts that would go unnoticed in the grand scheme of things. To further cover her tracks, Rachel cultivated relationships with key players in the financial world. She attended conferences, joined professional organizations, and built a reputation as a savvy businesswoman in her own right. These connections would prove invaluable in the years to come, providing her with both information and potential allies. Throughout this period, Rachel maintained her composure with remarkable discipline. She continued to play the role of the supportive wife, even as she worked tirelessly to undermine everything David held dear. There were moments when the weight of her deception threatened to overwhelm her, but she would steel herself by remembering the pain of David's betrayal. As the months turned into years, Rachel's secret fortune grew, hidden away in accounts across the globe. She knew that her plan would take time to come to fruition, but she was prepared to wait. After all, revenge, like the finest wine, only improves with age. Over the next decade, the company grew from a promising startup into a juggernaut of the financial technology world. David Benozly became a celebrated figure in business circles, lauded for his visionary leadership and innovative approach. Rachel stood by his side at every public appearance, the picture of a supportive and proud wife. Behind closed doors, however, Rachel was the true architect of the company's success. Her financial acumen and strategic thinking were the driving forces behind the company's most successful initiatives. She worked tirelessly, not only to ensure the company's growth, but also to perfect her intricate system of embezzlement. As the company expanded, so did the opportunities for Rachel to divert funds. She created a labyrinth of transactions, each one carefully designed to be just small enough to avoid detection. Profits were funneled through a series of intermediary companies before ending up in her secret accounts. Rachel took advantage of international banking laws and cryptocurrency to further obscure the money trail. David, caught up in the whirlwind of success and his ongoing affair with Olivia, remained blissfully unaware of Rachel's machinations. He basked in the glow of public adoration, accepting awards and giving keynote speeches at prestigious events. His ego grew in proportion to the company's success, making him even more susceptible to Rachel's subtle manipulations. Rachel used David's inflated sense of self-importance to her advantage. She encouraged him to take more risks, to expand into new markets, and to make bold acquisitions. Each new venture provided her with fresh opportunities to siphon off funds. She was careful to ensure that the company remained profitable and continued to grow, knowing that its success was crucial to maintaining her cover. As the years passed, Rachel's secret fortune grew to staggering proportions. She invested wisely, diversifying her hidden portfolio to include real estate, precious metals, and art. She even set up a separate identity, Victoria Ultio, complete with impeccable documentation, which she would use to manage her assets and eventually make her escape. Throughout this period, Rachel maintained her public persona with unwavering dedication. She chaired charity events, cultivated friendships with influential people, and even wrote a best-selling book on financial empowerment for women. Her reputation as a brilliant businesswoman and philanthropist grew, providing her with a network of contacts that would prove invaluable in the future. The strain of living a double life did take its toll on Rachel. There were nights when she lay awake, questioning the morality of her actions. But then she would remember the look of adoration on David's face when he was with Olivia, or overhear him making plans for another secret rendezvous, and her resolve would harden once more. As the company approached its 10th anniversary, Rachel knew that the time to execute the final phase of her plan was drawing near. The company had reached a peak in its valuation, and market analysts were beginning to question whether its growth could be sustained. Rachel recognized that this was the perfect moment to strike, when David's guard was down and the financial world was still singing his praises. In preparation for her endgame, Rachel began to subtly withdraw from her roles in both the company and their social life. She cited a desire to focus on her philanthropic work and personal projects. David, self-absorbed as ever, barely noticed the change. He was too preoccupied with maintaining his public image and managing his affair to pay much attention to his wife's activities. As the pieces of her plan fell into place, Rachel felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. She had meticulously crafted her revenge, and soon she would see it come to fruition. The empire she had helped build was about to crumble, and from its ashes, she would emerge reborn, wealthy beyond measure, and finally free from the shackles of her fraudulent marriage. Despite Rachel's careful planning and execution, there were several moments over the years when her scheme came dangerously close to unraveling. These close calls served as stark reminders of the precarious nature of her deception and forced her to adapt and refine her methods constantly. One of the most harrowing incidents occurred in 2017 when the company underwent a routine audit by an external firm. The lead auditor, a sharp-eyed accountant named John Mitchell, began to ask pointed questions about certain discrepancies he had noticed in the company's financial records. Rachel's heart raced as she realized that Mitchell was dangerously close to uncovering her embezzlement scheme. Thinking quickly, Rachel orchestrated a series of distractions and misdirections. She accidentally spilled coffee on Mitchell's laptop, necessitating a delay in the audit. During this time, she worked feverishly to patch the holes in her financial smokescreen. When the audit resumed, Rachel had managed to cover her tracks, but the experience left her shaken and more cautious than ever. Another complication arose in 2020 when David unexpectedly decided to bring in a new CFO, citing his desire for Rachel to have more time for her philanthropic pursuits. The new CFO, Sam Lopez, was known for his forensic approach to financial management. Rachel knew that Lopez's presence posed a significant threat to her operations. To neutralize this threat, Rachel employed a multifaceted approach. She used her extensive network to gather compromising information on Lopez, which she kept as insurance. Simultaneously, she befriended Lopez's wife, Jen, integrating herself into their personal lives. This allowed Rachel to subtly influence Lopez's decisions and keep him focused on areas of the business that wouldn't interfere with her plans. Perhaps the closest call came in 2021, when David's mistress, Olivia, began to grow dissatisfied with her role as the other woman. In a fit of jealousy, Olivia threatened to expose the affair to Rachel. Unbeknownst to both David and Olivia, Rachel intercepted this threat. Recognizing the potential for this situation to derail her carefully laid plans, Rachel took decisive action. She anonymously provided Olivia with evidence of David's other indiscretions, effectively turning Olivia against him. Simultaneously, she manipulated events to make David believe that Olivia was becoming a liability. The result was a messy but quiet end to their affair, with Rachel's involvement remaining hidden. Each of these close calls left Rachel increasingly paranoid. The constant stress of maintaining her facade while orchestrating her complex revenge began to take a toll on her mental and physical health. Yet each near discovery only strengthened her resolve. She knew that she had come too far and sacrificed too much to let her plan fail now. As 2022 dawned, Rachel sensed that the time had come to set the final stage of her plan in motion. The company had reached its peak, with a market valuation that exceeded even David's wildest dreams. The financial world was at their feet, and David's ego had never been more inflated. It was the perfect moment for Rachel to pull the rug out from under him. Over the past few months, Rachel had been methodically transferring her hidden assets to her alter ego, Victoria Ultio. She had purchased a private villa with view of Lake Zurich in Switzerland under this name, and had begun the process of establishing a new life there. Every detail was meticulously planned, from her new wardrobe to the carefully crafted backstory she would use in her new community. In preparation for her disappearance, Rachel began to plant seeds of doubt about the company's future prospects among key investors and industry analysts. She used her network of contacts to spread subtle rumors about potential regulatory issues and market saturation. Her goal was to create a climate of uncertainty that would exacerbate the chaos that would follow her vanishing act. Rachel also took steps to ensure that the authorities would be led down false paths in their inevitable investigation. On the home front, Rachel began to distance herself emotionally from David, citing stress and a need for personal space. She spoke of taking a solo vacation to find herself, laying the groundwork for her disappearance. David, self-absorbed as ever, barely registered these changes in his wife's behavior. The night before her planned departure, Rachel allowed herself a moment of reflection. She stood in her walk-in closet, surrounded by the trappings of the life she was about to leave behind. Designer dresses, expensive jewelry, and photographs of a smiling couple that no longer existed. For a brief moment, she felt a pang of doubt. But then she remembered the pain of David's betrayal, the years of living a lie, and the future that awaited her. With renewed determination, she finished packing a small, inconspicuous suitcase with the essentials she would need for her new life. Everything else, the clothes, the jewels, the memories, would be left behind. A final act of shedding her old identity. As she lay in bed for the last time next to her sleeping, oblivious husband, Rachel allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Tomorrow, Rachel Benozly would cease to exist, and her masterpiece of revenge would be complete. On the morning of March 15, 2022, David Benozly woke to find the other side of the bed empty. This in itself was not unusual. Rachel was often an early riser. What was unusual was the silence that permeated the house. No smell of coffee brewing, no sound of the shower running or closet doors opening. David called out for Rachel, his voice echoing through the empty rooms. As the minutes ticked by and his calls went unanswered, a sense of unease began to creep over him. He checked her closet, noting with growing alarm that some of her clothes were missing. Her favorite suitcase was gone from the attic. In the kitchen, he found a note propped against the coffee maker. "I need some time to myself. Don't try to find me." At first, David assumed Rachel had simply followed through on her talk of a solo vacation. But as the hours passed and his calls to her cell phone went straight to voicemail, his concern deepened. By evening, with still no word from Rachel, David finally called the police to report her missing. Search parties were organized, flyers were distributed. Behind the scenes, however, the investigation was taking an unexpected turn. As detectives dug into the Benozly's financial records, they began to uncover discrepancies. Small at first, but growing larger and more numerous as they delved deeper. It soon became clear that this was no ordinary missing persons case. As days turned into weeks with no sign of Rachel, the focus of the investigation shifted. What had started as a search for a missing woman was rapidly evolving into a complex financial crimes investigation. And at the center of it all was David Benozly, who found himself facing a barrage of questions he couldn't answer and accusations he couldn't refute. As the investigation into Rachel's disappearance intensified, David's world began to crumble around him. The financial discrepancies uncovered by the police led to a full-scale audit of the company's books. What they found sent shockwaves through the financial world. Years of careful embezzlement were brought to light, revealing a scheme of staggering proportions. Millions of dollars had been siphoned off through an intricate web of false accounts and shell companies. The auditors were stunned by the complexity and longevity of the fraud. Rachel had created the paper trail to point to David as the mastermind behind the embezzlement. Signatures on key documents, authorizations for suspicious transfers, and emails discussing questionable financial strategies all bore his mark. David vehemently denied any knowledge of the fraud, but his protestations rang hollow in the face of mounting evidence. His reputation, once sterling, was now in tatters. As news of the scandal broke, the company's stock price plummeted. Investors fled in droves, and clients began terminating their contracts. The empire that David had spent years building collapsed overnight. The company was declared bankrupt. David Benozly was arrested and bail was denied. He clearly was a flight risk. The stress of the situation took a severe toll on David's health. He began to suffer from anxiety attacks and insomnia. The once handsome David now looked like a homeless drug addict. His friends and associates deserted him. The stress proved too much and David was found dead in his jail cell, having suffered a massive heart attack. As news of David's death spread, speculation ran rampant. Was he guilty? Where is his wife? Did he kill her? In the meantime, Victoria Ultio is taking the view of Lake Zurich. Victoria is the goddess of victory in Roman mythology, and Ultio is Latin for vengeance. Thank you for being with us for these episodes of Tom's True Crime. If you are interested in more in-depth investigations into the most perplexing crimes, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. What are your thoughts about the cases? Please share them with us in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe.